So what we're trying is always in security, regardless of the cybersecurity, financial crime, prevention, or whatever, you're always trying to raise the bar. You're always trying to build layers of defense, if you will. So I think by us, you know, even in the world of testing of sanctions, where people were coming on with their own data sets, we already can tell that we cover way more than what a manual tester would in terms of coverage of use cases. You would not be surprised that if new ways of building, when the technology advances, there would be new ways of doing, of circumventing those technologies. It has happened since the beginning of time. So I don't suspect that you can claim one way or the other. What I would think is that you raise the bar, you continue to raise the bar, right? And if you are able to train models based on the synthetic data that we generate, then those models should be able to detect those cases, right?
However, why we're excited that we will bring this problem to a community as Bittensor and miners, because I know there is a miner somewhere in the basement in Africa. There's a miner somewhere in Asia, someone in Latin America. And these miners already on the ground know what kind of document they are seeing. So they have the real document in their hand. So they will help us to generate a real, authentic, synthetic data. Because for real miners, I will not say they are cheating or it's exploitation. I would say they are like, if you think about it as a reinforcement learning agents. They try to get, based on the reward function you give it to them, they want to optimize the rewards. They don't care about the big picture. They don't care about what you want, what customer want. They want to get the maximum reward. They are reinforcement learning agents. And in that case, they're always looking for the shortcut.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we're joined by Asem and Jose of Yanis Compliance, Subnet 54. We cover their backgrounds in financial crime prevention, KYC, and biometrics, the Subnet's core thesis of generating multimodal inorganic identities, the mechanics of miners decoding threat scenarios, upcoming expansions into deepfakes, synthetic documents, and full digital identities, and strategies for raising the bar against evasion. Now, back to Asem and Jose with the 63rd Ventura Labs podcast.
All right, Jose and Awesome of Subnet 54. I don't even know if I'm going to try to pronounce the name of it. You guys can. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Doing great. Nice meeting you, Grant.
You as well. So Yanez is the subnet. Yanis. Not sure how to say it. You guys can correct me there. But what is your experience in this essentially like financial crimes, KYC type of industry?
Well, let's start there. So the name of the company is Yanis Compliance, and then we operate the Yanis MIID subnet, which is Subnet 54. I've been working in the financial crime prevention space for over 15 years now. My previous startup was actually a platform for financial crime prevention for fintechs. And that had KYC, sanctions screening, transaction monitoring, case management, and a bunch of other stuff. We had at some point in our platform over 500 customers, and we sold the company in 2019 to a company called Accurate that was focused on identity verification and document verification. So we merged the technologies, and then we sold again to another company in 2021, GBG. But then in 23, I decided it was time to build my fourth startup. And I started working and talking to Awesome and our other co-founder, Ben, to start working on a different application within the financial crime prevention. That's how we came up with Yanis Compliance and how to then test systems and make sure that those systems were working as intended, which was always something that our customers were asking for, and it was very difficult as a provider to give that solution. So instead, then we decided to abstract that partner with a lot of people in the industry and then bring out a solution that would solve the problems of testing of ensuring systems are working as properly and so on. So that's how we ended up being here in this market. So a market that we know very, very well.
Yeah. And about me, I came here to US to do my PhD, and it was in machine learning, computer vision, and biometric, where how to use your face, fingerprint, iris to recognize it's you, and to answer the simple question, who are you? And I did my research on the biometric privacy, cryptology, and as well as how we generate synthetic. So my PhD thesis was about how to generate synthetic identities. And it's funny how the cycle complete now, and this is what I'm doing in the subnet. But before that, after the PhD, I did my postdoc in Michigan State University, and then I joined the startups. We start working in remote identity proving, where we're working on mobile biometrics. And then after that, I joined Accurant. That's when I met Jose, who just sold his identity mine to Accurant, and we met there. He was the product guy for everything. And I was there to build and start a team to build it in solving tampering using computer vision and machine learning. And during this time, we got acquired by GBG. And then after that, Jose already told me that he's starting a company. And I was super interested to keep moving between startups. So I joined Jose. So my experience in biometric, computer vision, and also document identification, and it's almost 15 years now. And I love working in this company, working with Jose and Ben. These guys are awesome. They know what they're doing, and they only ask me to do what I love to do every day. So, and now we are in Bittensor.
How did you guys get introduced to Bittensor? Because the subnet is only a few months old at this point. So how'd you get introduced, and what were your guys' first impressions of Bittensor?
That's an interesting question. So one of my best friends from high school came to me with a question because he already was operating in Bittensor. And because of the nature of some of the people that work in this ecosystem, he asked me. He knew that I was that I've been working in compliance for quite a bit, and he asked me, "Hey, I have these people that I don't know who they are, but I need to pay them and move money to these people. So how can I actually make sure that these people are not, somebody that I'm not supposed to be doing business with?" And I started explaining, the type of things that he can do and he could do. And then I asked, in order for me to give him some form of advice, I needed to understand how the money moved. And he said, well, there's this thing called Bittensor and this protocol. And he knew that I had a big background in crypto already, having worked with a lot of Bitcoin and Ethereum and so on in the past. So I started getting interested, and a dinner that was supposed to be an hour took about 5 hours. So he was having dinner at my house, and then he left like at 1 a.m. after a very long conversation, and he explaining and me understanding, trying. So that night, I went through the rabbit hole, and I came after that rabbit hole after not sleeping, I think for 2 days, and I call him up and say, this makes a lot of sense to me. This is the thing we need to be doing. I think I'm going to start building something here because it's very similar to something we wanted to do, not only that moment, but for in the future. So, and then I call Asem and Ben and say, hey guys, I just spent 2 days working on this thing, going through every paper that I could find myself into, doing all the math and the economics and the tokens and so on. So, I told them the idea, that what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, and then Asem got to work. Me on trying to figure out the economics of it, and Asem to figure out the rest of the stuff. So it seemed like interestingly, it was like a perfect fit for what I wanted to do, for what we wanted to do on this. And I think that gives us also a window into something that Asem and I already had talked about, which was, a much broader use of identities, and given our backgrounds in identities. And so it gave us that opportunity to see things that it would have been very difficult as a very small company to see in the future. So I think it opened that door, and that's how we got into it.
Asem, Jose gives you this call. He's like, we're going to start building on Bittensor. What were your first thoughts? What was your first impression of Bittensor?
Little bit suspicious what we're bringing and what they're doing. But the thing is, but it took me less than a couple of hours to say, no, this is actually no suspicious at all, because I already worked on the blockchain before. In one of the startup I was working, we were trying to do sovereign identity, and we're trying to build using decentralized blockchain to build sovereign identity. And we really have a couple of papers on that. So I'm familiar with that. But the concept of how the incentive that you give to the miners and the token and all of that make me how this is work and how does it work. That's make me a little bit for a couple of hours only. But once talked to Jose, we found out exactly something we are doing in our, and maybe we'll come to this soon, in our company to test sanction screening systems and how we build it, where we have our own machine learning models, and we have a model that generate the data, and we have a model that evaluate the work that this data, the other model is generating. So we really build our own validator and generator / miner. So we found out it's fit perfectly. And because we just started 2023, we have, as a small company, we are very small. We don't have an R&D team. And I found out actually that's my way to go to get my R&D team. And that's why I say miners are, I look to them as a team members. They are my R&D team, and how I can work with them. And evaluator is the people that I was actually working on. So it fit perfectly. And I said, let's go. I will say it's a tough journey for to figure out a lot of the details about how it works and all of this. But I think so far it was very interesting, because I woke up every day, have something new to do and something new to look to. And it's a very nice ecosystem. So we're enjoying ourselves here.
And before we get into too much of the nitty gritty of how the subnet works with the miners and validators, what would you say is the high level thesis or goal of the subnet? Why did you create Yanez, the subnet?
I think, the basic idea was that in order to test financial prevention systems, you need to know very well the identities that are behind it. You need to understand how these identities operate in there. And that was, in fact, that was the basis of my previous company, of how to use identities to correlate the information that you were getting, such that you could do a better detection. The principle was, the more you know about the the easier it is to spot whether there is a fraudulent activity or there is financial crime happening. That was the thesis of my previous company. So when we started with the concept of testing, we're testing from the same basis. We're testing from the basis of identities and how these identities then play a role into all of this. So when you go in and try to define what this subnet is about, is, okay, let's create, and we already had the concept that there is an intellectual property where we filed patents on, about how then to create these identities synthetically, and how to use these identities synthetically to test systems and so on. So the basic then was to say, how do we create all this data? How do we leverage, a whole network of scientists across the world that can give us this edge, can give us the ability to create data faster, so that we can get to use cases, and the many, many use cases that we're thinking about, in a much faster way. In fact, we already know that the time from the time that we start the design and get the miners working, that cycle seems to be much shorter than if we were to do it ourselves with our own research, given the constraints of our company, obviously, which are very small. So I think the basis of how you create a synthetic identity with all of those dimensions that we needed to, that's what we wanted to create in Bittensor, and that's what we're headed to.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that about what we think that brought us to Bittensor. Jose talked about faster, but also about the scale. Because I think with these miners working 24/7 and they have really excellent job, I think we can quickly, whatever the customer need, we can scale quickly. Again, we cannot do that as a small team. Recency, I mean that these miners always bringing new models, which is something that they always get updated, but add to that diversity. Each miner bring his own pipeline, his own model, which is a crucial part for our testing or synthetic identity we're generating for testing. And diversity and generating unbiased data is important, because if we build it by ourselves, I don't think we can bring so much color, so much diversity by the technology and the models and the ideas as if you have like 200 or more miners working on that. And building identity need this diversity, because we cannot, one of the main issue that we see when test system, they are biased. Either they are biased because of how they train, they bias about maybe how they've been tested. So our job as AN is to bring as much diverse data and cover the dimensions of the different attributes of the identity. And we believe decentralization of this problem and bringing to the Bittensor was actually really an innovation and a very unique to our customers, because now our customers are actually coming to us because we have this kind of, as I said, scale, recency, and diversity in the data.
In terms of the subnet mechanics here, for validators, miners, and the subnet owner, what would you say, or what is the role of the miner? What do they do specifically?
Okay. I can go in that one and start with this one. So I'll just go with the bigger picture and then discuss about what's happening today. The bigger picture that we are now to create synthetic identity. And if you think about the identity of a person, there's multiple dimensions to describe someone. Either a name, or simple his location, his date of birth, which we call sometimes demographic attributes, and then more to that, biometric documents, all of his digital presence in the digital world, transactions he do. All of this present your identity in this digital world. And the question is, we need to bring all of these attributes of the identity to test the system, and depend about the testing. If it's we want to do AML, sanction screening, or transaction monitoring, or KYC. So you want to bring different type and different attributes and different dimensions.
I think that, just let me add something there, which I think is important, is that many times the attributes of the identities are also gated by the verification technology that is available. So when we talk about biometrics, when we talk about voice and fingerprints and so on, is because there is a technology on the other side that is saying, oh, we can verify this identity by the combination of face and document and so on. So there is an important part of those identities that is given by the technologies that are validating those identities. So that's how you create this multidimensional thing that Sam is talking about.
Yeah, and that's in the name of the subnet, because some people ask, what's MIID? MIID is a multi-model inorganic identity dataset. We are generating this. But in phase one, which is what we are in now, which we'll add to it soon enough, is that name variation, which is one of the way that we are testing sanction screening systems. And what we are asking the miners today is that we have names, and these names should be, let's say, a sanctioned person, and we have his name. The testing system should be able to give alert based on this name. But if he came with different variation, sometimes these sanction system fail to detect his name. For instance, my name, Asem Othman. If they already trained and they know that in the sanction, the name is Asemothman, but sometimes simply by adding Aassem, Othman, sometimes some systems would not catch that. So the idea is to provide them with a variation of the name to be able to test these sanction systems. So in phase one, what we are asking the miner is we provide them with names and we give them some kind of 3 challenges to generate name variation. These challenges are, I want you to generate name variation that sound similar, phonetic challenge. We ask them to generate some names that look similar, spell similar, which we called orthographic similarity or orthographic challenge. And then also there are some rules that is known in the sanction screening system where you swap the first name and the last name. Maybe you replace the first letter or you remove the first letter, or maybe you add a title. There's some defined rules. And this is the third channel, is rule-based. We ask them to give variation based on specific rules. So we provide these kind of challenges for as seed names, we provide the names, and we ask the miner to generate variations based on these challenges. To continue in that, but our customers don't send names. They also send threat scenarios, a description of a problem they wanted to test these sanction screening systems. Hence, when we send to the miner, we just not send raw names, or the validator in that case, they don't send raw names. They send attributed encoded query where we get these challenges, generate using a large language model, a query, and we send this query to the miner. And in this query, we say, I want you to generate 10 names for Asem, variation of Asem Othman, but I want 3 of them to sound similar and 2 of them change the spelling, make it as close to Asem, but it changed different letters. And rule-based, add a title, swap the first name and the last name, things like that. But we add it as in a natural language query because that's how we receive the request from our customers. They send us a message, an email. I want to test these sanction screening systems and I want this to happen because I saw this. So they send like an email or a message. So we wanted to make sure that is our miners can be able to help us in this kind of decoding these threat scenarios.
So I think so. So what Asem just described, first off, is a first in the industry. So I just want to say that what we are doing here about the use of natural language to describe risk scenarios, such that you understand whether your systems are responding to those risk scenarios, is that way of expressing, generating data, and executing is absolutely new in the market. There's nothing like it in the market. Because if you think about it, most systems, and maybe you do or you do not know this, but most systems that do detection and prevention are based off specific rules or specific models that are encoded in variables and parameters and so on. But there's no system that is being configured in a natural language way. But if you think about the people that work in those systems, they don't necessarily need to think, oh, the standard deviation of this alert should be twice as much as the other one, right? So the people that encode these things have to translate from what is a risk scenario and a threat scenario into the parameters that are encoded into the system that allows them to express the risk of those scenarios. It would be much easier if those scenarios were described in natural language, because that's the way that most people think about them. Most people think about what is a threat that is coming, and they express that threat in a natural language. And so this part that Asem just went through is absolutely super important, that the miners are not only producing the data that we're asking, but they're actually decoding the scenario and translated that into data that then is going to be used. That is huge. That the importance of that cannot be understated.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
Yeah, no, good. Please go ahead because there is some kind of coloring need to be added sometimes to that as well to attach it. Because let me tell you what the validator simply do, and say one of the, like, first of all, the validator is simply generate the query using a large language model and based on some different configurations, and then send to the miner this query that say describe a threat scenario because of this kind of attack, and because of this you have this seed name, and I wanted to generate 10 variation for each of these seed names. I want some of them to be sound similar but not very close. I want them to be medium similarity, and then I want some of them to change the spelling, and I want them as far as possible, and I want to, as I say, some cases, so they generate the query and send it to the miner, and then after that the miner return the name variation. The validator bring that and use our reward mechanism, and the heart of our reward mechanism is we are not paying the let's say, because they are team members, we are not paying our team members, just producing output. The crux here is the quality of this synthetic identity to meet the challenges that Jose just described. And the thing is, in the heart of everything is our customer needs. We know what our customer, because we are working with our customer today. So we know exactly what they need. And based on that, that's how we make sure that our reward mechanism, our evaluation is, this is the main important part, is the quality of the data. It's not how large, how big, how many, how quick. It's about the quality of that's to serve our customers.
Could we run through a specific example of what a risk could be of me spelling Asem ASEM versus me spelling Asem ASIM? What's the difference here? Why does that matter? Who gets value in this?
Well, let me start with, so in the world of sanctions, the rule is, and the law says, you cannot deal with anyone that is being sanctioned. So a simple example, imagine that, somebody comes in from a location that you don't recognize, and it happens to be a city in North Korea. So the regulator doesn't care that you use 100 million technologies to try to detect this. They don't care. The fact that you did business with somebody that is sanctioned is a big problem. Big problem to the problem that in the past 15 years, the regulators have issued more than $300 billion in fines for doing businesses with people that you shouldn't be doing business with, right? So the regulator expect that you do your best in trying to do these things, but it still would fine you even if you did your best and you still did, then it still will fine. Now, imagine now that you're on the other end and you want to evade sanctions. There is a lot of techniques to evade sanctions. For example, as Asem was talking about, what happened if I, instead of saying Jose Caldera, I say, oh, I'm Mr. Jose Caldera, right? Many systems cannot detect the fact that you use Mr. Jose Caldera as Jose Caldera. So you have to be able to say Mr. Jose Caldera, because Jose Caldera could use Mr. to evade the detection system that is there. Sometimes companies have gotten fined because they cannot distinguish between a capital letter and lowercase letter. So the name is written in caps, and then they were not expecting all the time caps, and they did business with organizations like that. And these are in the world of, again, the sanctions, OFAC, which is the regulatory body in the States, would issue these enforcement actions. These enforcement actions would have details of the cases that they found. And you wouldn't believe some of these cases, like, as I said, capital letter versus lower versus or that they mispronounce a name, or that they transliterate a name. So, for example, if in the list, they say, I will use example of Mohammed, just because Mohammed has tons and tons of way of actually writing the name, the same name, just spelled differently in Latin script, meaning in English. But there are many ways to to write the same name that comes from a different language. It could be written in Arabic, or it could be written in Cyrillic, or it could be written even in the same script language like French, for example, that is also Latin. But there are many ways of writing with stress, with accents, without accents, and so on. So the systems then need to be aware that this changes, that these ways of writing may happen because people actually try to evade sanctions by using misspellings, by using additional names, by using phonetic matches, and so on. Because then you can call, say you call your customer support, right? And then instead of writing the name, you tell the name, you say the name, and somebody say, "Oh, how do you write Muhammad?" Well, there are 10 ways of writing Muhammad, right? So, or writing Jose, and you say, okay, without any accent, or with the accent, and so on. And imagine that then those need to be screened. And if the system doesn't understand the different ways that you can spell, that you can write, that you can mistakenly for purpose or not, then those things then don't get flagged. And if they don't get flagged, then these people actually get fined. Right? So there's that motivation. And obviously, as in any financial crime prevention, there's also the motivation that you really don't want, terrorists, or you don't want sanctioned individuals, or you don't want, money launderers or human traffickers in your system.
And then what is the current demand you guys are seeing just for this synthetic name variation generation, which is just step one of what you guys are doing of building out this full digital identity for people? What's the current demand for this offering?
So every regulated entity in the United States and in the world has to be able to test their systems, meaning that the regulation almost in every country expects that you do this testing. So that means that the market for doing this is gigantic, right? The demand is not so much about the data for name variation, is about the testing of the system that require this type of data. That's the demand that the company, Yanis Compliance, gets is, okay, how do we better test all of the systems and so on? So the demand for testing is there in the sense that each one of these organizations has to perform this. And today, most of that is done manually. So people create these data sets by hand. Most people create these data sets by hand. And obviously what we're trying to say is, wait, we can automate all of this. We can broaden the scope. We can do it automatically. We can do it better, faster, stronger, whatever we use. And that message is really resonating with the clients. Now, the possibilities for what we are creating in terms of beyond the current state, which is a name variation, it is absolutely huge. It's gigantic. It's the use of synthetic identities to do model training, it's in the months that we have been doing this and starting to expose some of what we can do now forward. It's been a little bit interesting to us because, and the network is going to see it soon because we're going to start asking new things. And the reason is simple. We are getting clients that are very interested now in what we're doing and pushing the concept of synthetic identities for testing, for model validation, for model creation, for training, for testing. So there's a lot of demand that we're going through.
What does the future look like in terms of creating these synthetic data sets? Does it go into like birth certificates, mail, and then biometric, like the two-factor authentication stuff, the KYC stuff? Is it creating synthetics of all of those? What does the future look like here?
Yes to all, and it's going to be faster than what we had expected, actually. And I think soon we're going to start unveiling some of this because, well, like a true startup, right? We we are going where the revenue is, and we're getting demands that require us then to start generating and accelerating a lot of things that we're doing. And all of the things that you described are things that we are starting to see, and we're starting to get asked about. And again, we're not yet, well known, right? It's just the start of where we are as a company. But the type of demand that we're seeing is very, very, very encouraging. And I think that a lot of the use cases that we have designed and we are working with, what we're seeing is an acceleration of that. And that's great to see. That's fantastic to see.
Asem, as someone with a PhD in this space of synthetic identities, what do you anticipate being the hardest thing to create synthetic datasets for in the future?
We actually going to introduce this, I would say, in the near future, which is we'll start with a hard problem, which is deepfake, how we can generate that, and how we can help our customers in the KYC domain to test their deepfake detections, along with maybe synthetic faces, and maybe this will move forward with other cases as well. The second one, which is really will be very interesting, is the document, because given that how the documents and the minutia details in the documents, we are talking about each document has its own way to say that's a valid, an authentic document. How we can generate what's look like an authentic document with a synthetic identity. It's someone name that is not there, someone face, he maybe didn't exist, but generate a synthetic document that can use and pass this kind of authenticity or test the authenticity will be not an easy problem. However, why we're excited that we will bring this problem to a community as Bittensor and miners, because I know there's a miner somewhere in the basement in Africa. There's a miner somewhere in Asia, someone in Latin America. And these miners already on the ground know what kind of document they are seeing. So they have the real document in their hand. So they will help us to generate a real, authentic, synthetic data. This is the hardest, maybe one of the things that we're bringing after maybe start working on the biometrics as deepfake and face recognition, synthetic faces in that case, and then bring these documentations. However, one of the things that will be, I will not say hard, but one of the things is about how we will introduce the concept and validate or evaluate is the digital presence as well as transaction. We want to, at the end of the day, we will be able to create a synthetic inorganic, let's say inorganic identity that have a biometric, that have a document, that is doing a digital transactions with other synthetic identities, and it's a synthetic or inorganic identities that behaving and have a digital presence. If we're able to build this kind, it will, I want to say will be farther than KYC and AML. This can go to different applications that will be very interesting, but we are going one step at a time. Let's start with name, and we're going one by one, and we have a couple of things coming soon as well.
Yeah, I think that when we started, we purposely started with use cases that we knew were going to be relatively simple, right? That because we wanted to get also, train and understand how the protocol operates, how the miners would operate, and build relationships, with miners. At the end of the day, we need these relationships. We need trust in these relationships because we are going to depend on this output as a company, right? So it's not, there is a company that has contracts with very large companies that we need to ensure that we're going to get the right output, the quality of the output. So for us, starting small made a lot of sense because we needed to start learning and building the relationships. And so far we have I think we have been very successful in starting to build those relationships and get to know who the miners are, and even that relationship, those trust that we're going to need to be very strong, because the future is very bright and is very broad. So there's a lot of things that we know.
In the future, when you add these documents and creating synthetic documents, how do you think about if a miner went on the black market and just got a bunch of stolen identities and then reported those to you guys as synthetic? Or how do you guys think about identity fraud and those type of things, and how is that applicable to what you guys are doing here?
When you ask a question about what you thought Asem was the hardest thing to do, I think that is going to be one of the things that is really hard. Is going to ensure that the models that the miners are building are not being used for other purposes than what we're intending to do. So we do have a lot of access to technology that allows us to understand, synthetic identities and stolen identities and so on. So a lot of that is going to be built into the process. The other thing that we're thinking about is fingerprints across the identities, such that people understand that these identities are synthetic. The build of a synthetic identity, and this is actually quite interesting, because we call it, there is a very negative connotation to the word synthetic identity in the market. So that's one of the reasons why we call ours inorganic identities, not synthetic identities, because the use of synthetic identity has a very negative context in the business. And that's why we chose inorganic, because we're building also pieces of it that we believe are going to help the people in the wild to understand whether this is an organic identity or not. But there is a challenge, I think, that we're going to face as a company, that we have to provide the right tooling and the right guardrails to make sure that we don't fall into one of these problems.
Yeah, and to add to that is that don't forget, when we go and ask the miner to generate data, either names now or since inorganic identity, face biometric or document, we already define the attributes of what we want. So they need already to have a pipeline to generate, to decode and generate what we need. That's mean because when we have these validators working, each one of them have his own model. They bring their own, how to say, flavor or how the question is asked. So there is a broad spectrum of challenges. So the miners that go to the black market and maybe get 100 or even more of identity, there is no guarantee that he will hit this full spectrum of challenges. And so we always testing them about different formulation of the same problem, but different formulation, different threat scenarios, and all of that. So if the miner only rely on his skills to get something from black market, I don't think he would be able to cover the spectrum. The miner that do the work and start to work to make sure that he has the pipeline to generate the inorganic or synthetic document that we need that cover our attributes. Because as I said, for instance, for name, when we ask for a name, I'm not asking you to send any name variation. I have a clear description and the attribute how I want this. And we make sure this is how you generate the data and how we reward you. The same thing for the document. We will ask for a specific type of identity. Add to that specific type of capture, where we will say, just don't send me the image. I want you to send me a mimic of the image that has been captured using a cell phone or some kind of a noise that we see in a screen. So there will be a lot of attributes for each of this. So I don't think anyone just grabbed. And that's actually from day one, our reward mechanism has been built in a way that you serve what we want with the quality that we want, and try as much as possible prevent exploitation or I don't like the word cheating, although maybe in the code we call it cheating, maybe in the metric we call it cheating. And maybe I wanted to elaborate more about this kind of concept of exploitation. I'm not, maybe that's not the answer for your question, but this is something we always working on in this reward mechanism. That's what makes a problem harder than another problems. Because for me, miners, I will not say they are cheating or it's exploitation. I would say they are like, if you think about it as a reinforcement learning agents, they try to get, based on the reward function you give it to them, they want to optimize the rewards. They don't care about the big picture. They don't care about what you want, what customer want. They want to get the maximum reward. They are reinforcement learning agents. And in that case, they're always looking for the shortcut. If you build a robot and you give it a reward to reach the goal, if the robot starts jumping the wall and reach the goal for him, he get the reward. But you don't want him to go over the maze walls. You want him to go in the maze. So it is, I think, what we are doing as a subnet owner, and this is one of the things we are doing in a daily basis now, looking to the results, making sure that it cover the needs that our customer want. And Yanis Compliance already have a customers. We already know the needs. We're already providing them with what they need. So we always in the lookout if there is any behavior that look like optimization behavior, but it doesn't deliver the true objective of what we need, a realistic quality data. So this is something we will always, let's make it always, what make different problems harder than others is not only the data, is about also the how we will reward, how we will track, and how we make sure that our reward function, there is no shortcuts. You won't have to deliver realistic identity or realistic data that based on what the customer needs. Yeah.
Is this a problem that you think offense or defense is easier? Meaning, someone that's sanctioned, could they bypass these security systems with the same synthetic data generation that you guys are using to create these data sets? Or is detection easier?
I guess it's a balance, but if history serves us right, bad people are always ahead, and I think that is true in every. So, before financial crime, my background is in cybersecurity, and it doesn't matter. There's one thing that always people say that if you have enough resources and you have enough motivation, you're always going to find your way through, right? And any assumptions that you make about a system, any assumptions you make about how for example, when we think about identity verification today, we think about a set of verification technologies that are built around trying to understand identity, who you are as an identity. I would not be surprised that if new ways of building, when the technology advances, there would be new ways of circumventing those technologies. It has happened since the beginning of time. So I don't suspect that you can claim one way or the other. What I would think is that you raise the bar. You continue to raise the bar, right? And if you are able to train models based on the synthetic data that we generate, then those models should be able to detect those cases, right? But doesn't necessarily mean that you could prevent new cases and new things of using. I'll give you an example, a very, very easy example. So when I started this, the proxy for identity was something called device fingerprint. Basically means, I know who you are because you come from the same phone or the same computer or whatever, and then, name it, a day later, somebody came up with a new way of saying, I'm using the same device, but I'm using something different, right? It's a ways to simulate that you're from the same device, and then, or doing proxies or there were so many ways that you can. So, you know about those, and then you try to catch up, and you build, face detection, and you build selfies, and you build this, and then deepfakes comes about. Now you have to, you know what I mean? That it's always a race. It's always a race, and it seems they're always a little bit behind the bad people that have a lot of money, that have a very strong motivation to get through, right? So what we're trying is always in security, regardless of it's cybersecurity, financial crime, prevention, or whatever. You're always trying to raise the bar. You're always trying to build layers of defense, if you will. That. So I think by us, you know, even in the world of testing of sanctions, right, where people were coming out on with their own data sets, we already can tell that we cover way more than what a manual tester would in terms of coverage of use cases, right? So now we're raising the bar because we're helping these customers to say, hey, Mr. Vendor, I need the technology that helps me solve these use cases that you are not solving, right? And that's how the whole thing gets better, right? So you are challenging the vendors, you're challenging the space to become better and better and better. And I think this is going to continue. And we are about to say it because Asem is not going to want me to say it, but very soon there will be a set of whole new use cases that we're going to be testing. And given what we know there are going to be some interesting cases there that the current market is not very well prepared for. But what we're trying to do is to have this conversation with the vendors to say, this is coming. I want you to be better. And because that's the story, right? So we have to get this technology better. We have to get the market better. And we just continue to raise the bar. So can somebody use it for other purposes? I guess you could say they could get ideas, but this is true no matter what. And I think it's better to be proactive about it than to be reactive.
And I think I just wanted to emphasize on raising the bar because this is the uniqueness about Bittensor and having Yanis generating data in Bittensor working with the miner. Because where is a hacker that can find an R&D team of 200 people, let's say 200, if all of them are in different cold keys, all of them are trying to generate data to raise the bar and test the system. Who can find a team of white hackers that like what we have? We are generating the data, and these hackers are getting legal money. They're getting money. They're getting incentivized. In the minute you send the data, you get incentivized. No one can guarantee that. So I think we're in better position to raise the bar for many of our customers with what we are doing in Bittensor. That again, I just wanted to highlight because this is the uniqueness and adding the secret sauce we have as well, the diversity of the data and filling the gaps. So when we go to the customer, we raise the bar already with many testing partners. So this is beautiful in Bittensor because I never imagined that how quickly and how scale and how diverse the data that I can get from our miners. Once I know the threat scenarios, they are there. And in a day, I have everything. I cover all the gaps. I don't need more than that. So that's what awesome about what we are having here.
That leads me into the last question. You almost answered it there beautifully. But my last question for you guys today is, as experts in your field before Bittensor, what advice would you have for other experts in various fields of how to utilize Bittensor or apply Bittensor to the problems that they're trying to solve? What advice would you have for those other experts, either in your own field or other adjacent fields?
You want to go first, Asem? I'll go last. Go ahead.
Okay. So my advice to them is, as in this AI era, everyone is thinking how to use AI to advance what you're doing. So if you are a researcher or academia, AI is a commodities that you are using somewhere in your research. Either you're generating data or learning, or maybe you're solving a problem that is unique. And usually if you are solving a problem, you have a question and you wanted to evaluate this question based on a function, and maybe you need to generate data. So a data set. And then based on that, you can do your research. I think what Bittensor provide here is that you can actually pick any part of that, either generation of the data to see your reward functions, or bring the data and ask the miners how to build you to get this optimization or reward and help you to do that. So, but the thing is, you need to come with a clear roadmap, exactly what you need to do. And also the same thing, and a good understanding about how the dynamic of Bittensor. Again, as I said, miners are like, they try to optimize. So if you are not a subnet owner or a researcher, that you understand exactly what's your main objective. Is it the quality? Is it response? What you want exactly, and making sure that you're reviewing this will make a big difference. I just wanted to shout out to something we are doing internally and externally, just to make sure that help us as well as a subnet owner, bringing our own problem. We have two type of dashboards. We have our own internal dashboard where we are reviewing the data in a constant pace. If I'm not saying if maybe hourly, or if it's not daily, it's hourly, where we see the results and we check, we make sure that we're covering all the gaps. And we are using this, we have our own kind of post-processing to make sure that we're covering all the test threat scenarios and all of that. The other thing is to make sure that the miner know where they're doing. So we build an external dashboard to show the miner their rank, their scores, and some kind of a breakdown exactly how they're performing at each level of our multi-layer reward mechanism. So make sure that you are ready also to do some extra subnet operation, because this is needed to make sure that you get the quality that you are, or you're looking for to solve your problem. And please call us or send us an email, and I'll give you more details about that as well. Jose?
Yeah, my sort of view and advice is going to be a little bit different in terms of the purpose and the focus. So I think the economics are very important, and I think as a startup, Bittensor has many good things in terms of advancing the technology and advancing the research and so on. There are many challenges in terms of how you fund the company and how you use and how you include the tokenomics of it in it. I would say that you need to have revenue in mind, because at the moment, that is probably one of the things that could upset the miners and the selling pressure of the miners. There are many ways, there are multiple ways you can do that, but as a startup, you need to think carefully about the impact of the tokenomics in your business, and try to understand how you're going to weave that into your budget, your plan, and so on. I don't think it's trivial to do that. I think as a company, and it may be different for somebody that think that the whole economics is based on the token, versus a company like ours that already was funded with equity and so on. And I think there are some conflicts in terms of how you think about tokens, how you think about equity, in where do you put the revenue, how you inform the token, and so on. So I think outside the absolutely, in my mind, very clear benefits on R&D, on building competitive advantage based on technology, you have to think also about the business. I think it's very important to think about the business, about the revenue, and about how you think about the token and the tokenomics of it.
Well, Jose and Asem, it's been a pleasure having you guys on the podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.